It's the 1980s and Nintendo is basically running the show in Japan. The Famicom had been crushing it for 3 years while Sega's Master System was still trying to catch up. Shigeru Miyamoto was the golden boy who just saved the entire gaming industry from that brutal 1983 crash with Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. He was on fire. But here's the thing. While Miyamoto was getting all the glory, there was this other team at Nintendo that was getting pretty jealous.
The challenge is Metroid. The power is Nintendo. Defend the planet Xephus against the evil Mother Brain. It's survival or destruction. To battle or die. Metroid only from Nintendo.
Gunpei Yokoi's R&D 1 crew had been the ones making Nintendo's early hits and invented the Game & Watch series. You know those little handheld games your parents probably had? Yeah, that was them. But now Miyamoto's team was hogging all the spotlight, and Yokoi's guys were like, we need to make something that'll blow everyone's minds. At the time, the Famicom disk system was killing it in Japan. It was an external floppy drive for your console, which sounds ancient now, but back then, having 128 kilobytes of storage was absolutely massive compared to those tiny 4K Atari cartridges. Plus, these games were way cheaper, and you could literally buy them from vending machines, which is peak Japan if you ask me. After Zelda showed everyone what you could do with all that storage space, nobody wanted to play boring baseball games anymore. So while Miyamoto got tasked with making a Mario sequel, Yokoi's team got the chance to prove they weren't washed up. Yokoi put together this tight 3-man squad. Makoto Kano handled the story and characters, Hiroji Kiyotake designed the protagonist and all the creepy bosses, and Yoshio Sakamoto directed the whole thing. Their goal was pretty ambitious. Make a shooting game that mixed Mario's platforming with Zelda's exploration, but make it actually scary. The team was totally obsessed with Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. They were watching this stuff and thinking, what if we made a game that felt like this? Then, halfway through development, someone on the team just suggested, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the person in the suit was actually a woman? And everyone was like, holy crap, yes. Just like that, they created one of gaming's biggest plot twists before plot twists were even a thing. While Mario and Zelda were all bright and happy, these guys wanted to make something that would genuinely creep you out. No cheerful music, no cute characters, just you, alone, in some nightmare alien cave system where everything wants to kill you. They named it Metroid, smashing together Metro like subway tunnels, and Android because Samus looks like a robot. The game pushed the Famicom disk system hard. 5 major areas with over 250 unique rooms and 29 different enemy types, all crammed into that tiny memory space. They wanted Samus to crawl through tight spaces, but animating a crawling character would have eaten up way too much memory and time. So instead of giving up, they invented the morph ball. You just turn into a sphere and roll around. Such a simple solution, but it became one of the most iconic moves in all of gaming. The team had to figure out how to make a non-linear world actually work. Most games were just, go right until you win. But Metroid was like, here's a giant maze, figure it out. But the real kicker was the multiple endings. Finish fast enough and Samus takes off her helmet. Boom, she's got long hair. Go even faster and you see more of her. The speediest players got the full reveal that this armored space marine was actually a woman. In 1986, when every game hero was some mustachioed dude, this was absolutely mind-blowing. Hirokazu Hip Tanaka skipped Nintendo's usual catchy music and made dark, creepy sounds that feel alive. You only hear the main Metroid theme after beating Mother Brain, which makes the ending feel extra powerful. The technical specs were pretty wild for 1986. They were working with 64 kilobytes of RAM and 32 kilobytes for the actual program, with about 112 kilobytes total on the disk. The whole thing cost about 50 million yen to make and sold for 2,600 yen, about $17 now, which was way cheaper than cartridge games that went for 4,900 yen. That's like getting a premium game for half price today. The original Japanese version saved your progress like a normal person, but when they brought it to America, they had to use passwords instead. This created the legendary Justin Bailey code that gave you advanced gear while putting Samus in what's basically a pink swimsuit. Everyone thought Justin Bailey must mean something deep and mysterious. Nope, it was just random letters that happened to trigger the effect. The developers are probably still laughing about that one. When it came out, Famicom Tsushin gave it 29 out of 40 points, and everyone was praising how different it felt from other games. It sold 1 million copies on the disk system and another 3 million when they ported it to regular NES cartridges. Not Mario numbers, but pretty solid for something this weird and experimental. The real impact wasn't the sales, though. It was how many developers started copying this formula. That interconnected world design where you gradually unlock new areas, the atmospheric storytelling through just wandering around creepy environments. Games like Castlevania took this blueprint and ran with it, eventually creating this whole Metroidvania genre that's still huge today. To quote Nintendo's executive Howard Phillips, it was unlike anything we'd seen. The game trusted players to explore and discover rather than holding their hands. That might not sound like much now, but in 1986, when most games were jump on the Goomba, get points, this was revolutionary thinking. R&D 1 had pulled it off. They created something that could stand next to Mario and Zelda as a defining Nintendo franchise. More importantly, they proved that video games could be genuinely atmospheric and moody, not just fun distractions. So after that massive success, you'd think Nintendo would immediately start cranking out Metroid sequels, right? Wrong. The team basically disappeared for 5 years. While everyone was begging for more Samus, R&D 1 got completely sidetracked by this little project called the Game Boy. You know that brick-sized handheld that became the most successful gaming device ever made? Yeah, Gunpei Yokoi was kind of busy revolutionizing portable gaming. But by 1991, Yokoi was riding high on Game Boy success and finally ready to give Metroid fans what they'd been waiting for. But it was going to be a Game Boy exclusive. Some people were bummed about the black and white graphics, but honestly, I think it worked perfectly for Metroid's creepy atmosphere. Metroid 2: Return of Samus hit North America in November 1991, and right from the title screen, you knew this was going to be darker than the original. The Galactic Federation had basically hired Samus to commit genocide, travel to planet SR-388 and wipe out every single Metroid in existence. Talk about a morally questionable mission brief. The development team brought back Makoto Kano and Hiroji Kiyotake, with Hiroyuki Kimura joining as co-director. They had about 1 megabyte of ROM space to work with, tiny by today's standards, but pretty decent for Game Boy in 1991. The whole thing cost around 80 million yen to develop and retailed for 3,900 yen in Japan. Unlike the first game's open exploration, Metroid 2 forced you to clear a set number of Metroids in each area before moving on. Linear, but fitting since Samus was on an extermination mission. Now let's talk about something cooler, the Metroid life cycle. The first game only showed those floating jellyfish-like creatures, but Metroid 2 expands the idea completely. Larval Metroids grow into Alpha, then Gamma, Zeta, Omega, and eventually the massive Queen Metroid. Each stage plays differently and demands new strategies, making fights way more interesting than just blasting the same old target. Sales-wise, Metroid 2 moved almost 2 million copies worldwide, which was solid for a Game Boy exclusive. The ending completely subverted expectations. After slaughtering dozens of Metroids, Samus faces the Queen in this epic boss fight, but then she finds a single Metroid egg. The hatchling imprints on her like she's its mother, and despite her mission orders, Samus can't bring herself to kill it. This moment of humanity added serious emotional depth to what could have been a simple, kill all the aliens story. R&D 1 was swamped with Game Boy projects. Super Mario Land sequels were eating up all their programming talent, but Yoshio Sakamoto had been quietly planning something ambitious, a Metroid game for Nintendo's new 16-bit powerhouse, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Development began with a crazy ambitious goal: make the biggest, most detailed Metroid game ever created. Super Metroid almost got cancelled 3 times during development. Gunpei Yokoi was getting increasingly frustrated watching his team work insane overtime hours. "Are you guys trying to produce a work of art or something?" he'd shout when he saw them pulling all-nighters. Yokoi threatened to cut the budget and cancel the project multiple times because he thought they were being perfectionists to a fault. The final game used a massive 3 MB ROM cartridge, the largest SNES game at the time. Development costs hit around 150 million yen, making it one of Nintendo's most expensive projects. But when Sakamoto finally showed Yokoi the finished product, he was completely hooked on what they'd created. Super Metroid launched in Japan on March 19, 1994, retailing for 9,800 yen. The North American release followed in April at $80, premium pricing that reflected the game's massive scope. This wasn't just a sequel, it was a complete reimagining of what Metroid could be. The technical achievements were staggering. Mode 7 graphics created rotating backgrounds and scaling effects. The physics engine allowed for realistic momentum-based movement. Samus could now aim in 8 directions, charge her beam shots, and use the new grapple beam to swing across chasms like some kind of space Tarzan. The map system finally solved the getting lost problem that plagued earlier games. Players could see which rooms they'd visited, and which had secrets they hadn't found yet. The X-ray scope let you see hidden passages through walls. Sound design reached new heights with actual voice samples. They brought in members of Dolby to help mix the surround sound, and boss noises were sampled directly from Godzilla movies. The interconnected world design was perfection. Planet Zebes felt like a real place with distinct biomes. The jungle hell of Brinstar, underwater caverns of Meridia, and the lava-filled depths of Norfair. Each area had its own visual identity, soundtrack, and gameplay challenges. But the real genius was in the storytelling. Super Metroid tells its entire story through environmental design and gameplay without a single word of dialogue until the very end. The climax with Mother Brain remains one of gaming's most emotional moments. Just when it looks like Samus is doomed, the baby Metroid, now grown huge, intervenes to save its mother. The creature sacrifices itself to give Samus the power to destroy Mother Brain once and for all. Then you've got 3 minutes to escape the exploding planet, with this triumphant version of the main theme finally playing as you race to your ship. Super Metroid sold 1.5 million copies and earned perfect scores from multiple gaming magazines. Electronic Gaming Monthly called it the best game ever made in 2001. It consistently appears on greatest games of all time lists even today, decades later. The speedrunning community went absolutely insane with this game. The non-linear design allowed for sequence breaking on a whole new level. Players discovered they could skip entire areas, obtain upgrades out of order, and complete the game in under an hour. The current world record sits around 40 minutes. Super Metroid popularized the concept of completion percentage that tracked how many items you'd found. Getting 100% became an obsession for completionist players. The different endings based on completion time and percentage gave incredible replay value. Sakamoto originally intended Super Metroid to be the series finale. The story felt complete. Samus had defeated her nemesis Ridley, destroyed Mother Brain for good, and Planet Zebes was gone forever. After Super Metroid, 8 years have passed in silence. The Nintendo 64 era came and went without a single Metroid game. Sakamoto admitted he couldn't figure out how to make Samus work with the N64 controller. When I held the N64 controller in my hands, I just couldn't imagine how it could be used to move Samus around. An unidentified company even declined Nintendo's offer to develop a Metroid game because they weren't confident they could create a worthy successor to Super Metroid. Samus did make appearances in Super Smash Bros. For N64 in 1999, reminding players that this amazing character still existed. But for most of the late 90s, Metroid fans were left wondering if they'd ever see their favorite bounty hunter again. While Nintendo was figuring out what to do with Samus in 3D, fans were already creating their own Metroid experiences through ROM hacking and homebrew development. The early ROM hacking scene for Metroid started around 1998, when tools like Editroid and Smile, Super Metroid Integrated Level Editor, became available. These programs let dedicated fans completely redesign the original games, creating new layouts, changing graphics, and even adding entirely new mechanics. Hacks like Redesign and Hyper Metroid became legendary in the community for their brutal difficulty and creative level design. Some of these fan-made experiences were arguably harder than anything Nintendo ever released. But the real game changer came in 2000 when Shigeru Miyamoto visited a struggling Nintendo subsidiary called Retro Studios in Austin, Texas. The company was floundering with 5 different projects that were all going nowhere. Miyamoto looked at their work and basically said, "This is all garbage," except for one third-person sci-fi action game called Action Adventure that featured a female protagonist. Something clicked, and Miyamoto made a decision that would revive the franchise. Make this into a Metroid game. The announcement of Metroid Prime at E3 2001 sent shockwaves through the gaming community. First-person Metroid? Are you kidding me? Fans were convinced Nintendo was about to ruin their beloved franchise. The internet was full of doom and gloom predictions about how 3D would destroy everything that made Metroid special. Boy, were they wrong. Metroid Prime launched on November 17, 2002 for GameCube, retailing at $50, and completely silenced the haters. Retro Studios had pulled off the impossible. They translated the 2D Metroid formula into 3D without losing any of the atmosphere or exploration that made the series great. The lock-on targeting system, scanning mechanics, and seamless morph ball transitions felt like they'd always been part of Metroid's DNA. That same day, Nintendo released Metroid Fusion for Game Boy Advance, developed by Sakamoto's team. If the 3D experiment failed, at least they had a traditional 2D Metroid to fall back on. Both games sold incredibly well, with Prime moving almost 3 million copies worldwide and becoming the best-selling entry in the franchise until Metroid Dread 20 years later. The success kicked off the golden age of Metroid. 2004 brought us Metroid Zero Mission, a complete remake of the original with gorgeous GBA graphics and expanded content. Later that year, Metroid Prime 2, Echoes hit GameCube with its dark world, light world mechanic that made exploration even more complex. The game introduced the iconic Dark Samus, who became a fan-favorite antagonist. 2005 saw Metroid Prime Pinball for Nintendo DS. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Samus as a pinball bouncing around tables based on Prime locations. It was weird but surprisingly fun, selling over 800,000 copies to people who probably bought it as a joke gift. Metroid Prime Hunters arrived on DS in 2006, showcasing the system's online multiplayer capabilities. The single-player campaign was okay, but the real draw was 4-player wireless battles with different bounty hunters. The stylus controls for aiming were revolutionary at the time, even if they gave you hand cramps after extended play sessions. Metroid Prime 3, Corruption, wrapped up the Phazon trilogy in 2007 on Wii, using motion controls that actually enhanced the experience instead of feeling gimmicky. The game sold 1.5 million copies and featured some of the most emotional moments in the series, including Samus having to kill her corrupted bounty hunter allies. But then things got weird. Metroid Other M launched for Wii in 2010, developed by Team Ninja in collaboration with Sakamoto. The game cost around 200 million yen to develop, but only sold about 1.3 million copies worldwide. Critics and fans were divided on its portrayal of Samus as more emotional and dependent on male authority figures. Many felt it contradicted the strong, independent character they'd grown to love. The reaction was harsh enough that Nintendo basically put Metroid on ice again. 6 years passed with only Metroid Prime Federation Force in 2016, a chibi-styled co-op game that nobody asked for. An online petition to cancel the game gathered over 20,000 signatures before it even released. It debuted at 15th place on the 3DS sales charts and was widely considered a commercial failure. But in 2016 is where the fan community really stepped up. A team led by Milton Dr. M64 Guasti released AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake, after nearly a decade of development. This fan-made project completely reimagined Metroid 2 with modern graphics, new areas, and refined gameplay mechanics. The attention to detail was incredible. It really felt like an official Nintendo release. Nintendo issued takedown notices within days, but AM2R had already been downloaded millions of times, proving fans could rival the official games. It was even nominated for the Game Awards 2016 before copyright removal. The fan outcry over AM2R's takedown, combined with Federation Force's poor reception, finally convinced Nintendo that fans were desperate for a real Metroid game. At E3 2017, they dropped two massive announcements: Metroid Samus Returns for 3DS, and Metroid Prime 4 for Switch. Samus Returns, developed by Spanish studio Mercury Steam, launched in September 2017 for $40. It was essentially Nintendo's official version of what AM2R had attempted, a complete remake of Metroid 2 with modern graphics and gameplay. The game introduced the melee counter mechanic and 360-degree aiming that would become series staples. Sales hit around 1.3 million copies, proving there was still hunger for traditional 2D Metroid. While fans were eager for Metroid Prime 4, after 4 years they finally got Metroid Dread. Released on October 8, 2021 for Nintendo Switch at $60 and developed by Mercury Steam with Sakamoto overseeing, it was an idea dating back to 2005 that kept getting shelved because of technical hurdles. When it finally landed, Dread became the fastest-selling Metroid ever, topping 3 million copies and proving the series still had huge mainstream pull. Dread introduced the terrifying EMMI robots and concluded the story arc that began with the original Metroid. The game's difficulty and atmospheric design reminded everyone why Metroid had been so influential. Speedrunners immediately began breaking it down, with current records sitting around 1 hour and 26 minutes. February 2023 brought Metroid Prime Remastered to Switch, a complete visual overhaul of the GameCube classic with dual analog controls and enhanced graphics. Nintendo shadow-dropped it during a direct presentation, and it sold over 1 million copies within months. Today's homebrew scene is more active than ever. Projects like Metroid Confrontation and Super Metroid Subversion continue pushing the boundaries of what's possible with the original engines. The AM2R team has continued updating their game despite Nintendo's takedown, with version 1.5.5 adding new content and polish. MAME preservation efforts have documented every Metroid-influenced arcade game, ensuring they'll be playable forever. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is scheduled for release in 2025, and hopefully we're going to get it this time. Early footage shows a return to the exploration-focused gameplay that made the original Prime trilogy special. The development budget is rumored to exceed 500 million yen, making it one of Nintendo's most expensive projects ever. The franchise that began as R&D 1's attempt to prove themselves has become a cornerstone of game design philosophy, influencing everything from indie darlings like Hollow Knight to AAA blockbusters. Not bad for a game about a bounty hunter who turns into a ball. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive, drop a like and share your favorite Metroid memory in the comments, and I'll see you in the next mission.